All right, we're almost at 11, and there we are. We are at 11. So, in light of the fact that more time is better than less time for me, and the amount that I have to say, I'm going to start right on time today. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another webinar in the COVID 19 pandemic webinar series. The intention of these bi weekly webinars is for me to offer up some reflections that I am processing, that's coming into my awareness, and my thinking around those offerings or those thoughts, and then to offer them out to you so that it can help you process and do some inner work in regards to this time of the pandemic. So we all know that it's probably a good time to do some really good inner work while we have this time stepped away from our busy lives. And so this is an offering for me to kind of guide you along the path towards inner work, based on my own processing, my own guidance. So that's the intention of the Monday and Wednesday webinars. And so far, I believe we have I think this is the 6th in the series. And if you wish to go back and review any of the previous ones in case you missed them or you want to hear them again, you can just go to my YouTube channel, and they're all there for your viewing pleasure. So let me just introduce myself like I always do on every webinar. So hi, everyone. My name is Karen Spencer, and I am the founder and the CEO of a life coaching practice called It Can Be Different. The intention of the practice is to help smart and passionate adults that are going through a tough time, and they have come to the realization that they need to get past how they think and what they think about themselves and how they've been trained to think, in order to really achieve and realize the life that they truly want for themselves. So if you find yourself one of those people that are just stuck and find that life is becoming rather repetitive and you can't get past whatever it is that keeps holding you back, and you've come to the realization that all our power lies in our neurology and how we think, both consciously and, more importantly, unconsciously, and you would like to eliminate those kinds of barriers in a very easy and effective way, then this kind of coaching is going to be excellent for you. So today's webinar tails off of Monday's webinar. They kind of go into a thought stream, as I can see, as they're arising into my awareness. And today's webinar I've entitled Improvisation. And let me just reflect a little bit about what we talked about on Monday. So what we came up with on Monday is that it doesn't really matter how much we understand about the outside world. Our real work doesn't begin until we can turn inwards and understand our inside world. And when I refer to outside world, it's both the outside world, the greater macro outside world, and we talk a lot about how these learnings are being reflected back into the pandemic and what's going on in a very global basis. It's a very big mirror for us to look into based on what's going on in the inside world. So outside world can mean the greater outside world and how we're processing the global pandemic. And it can also refer to our general microcosm that we live within. The outside world meaning our family and our friends and our very small world. So let me say that statement again. It doesn't really matter truly what's going on the outside world. Our real work only begins and can truly happen when we do our work on the inside world, and that is us, within us. So I reflected on Monday how the tide seems to have been turning, and I'm sure you're experiencing this as well. And everyone's kind of moved out of shock and maybe fear a little bit, and have come to some sense of how to manage their lives in the pandemic. But now we've all become obsessed a little bit with this prediction. When is it going to end? How long will it take? What will it look like when it's over? What businesses will survive? What businesses won't survive? How will we interact with each other? And this obsession with prediction, although very important for life to manage forward, I offered up the idea that really becoming obsessed with our outside world and what is going on out there should be about 10% of our work, and that the 90% of the work should be really focused on the question, how am I going to respond? So not so much what is going to happen, but how am I going to respond? And, none of us came to this life, or none of us are really going to strive to be master predictors, master forecasters. We've all really come to this lifetime to really master our life's purpose, our life's lesson. What is the one big lesson that we need to move past in order to achieve a life full of wholeness and peace and ease, which is all of our entitlements in this lifetime. We are all entitled to that kind of experience, and we all uniquely have our own core wounds, our own problems that we need to move past, our inner workings, in order to achieve that. So, we really, once we get past this obsession with looking at our outside world, and I think I talked a lot a bit on Monday about how we can become very obsessed with what's going on even in our families and how everybody is responding to ourselves. And I used the analogy of what's going on with my mom here, and how when I really became focused on how I was handling it and what was going on for me and how I could best respond, because that's the only area that I truly have control of, is how I am responding, then my experience and how the whole experience showed up for me became so much easier. So we are all striving to obtain a state of really three things. My master that I like to follow, Lester Livingston, talks about three states that we are all trying to achieve. And we go about it in various different ways, and we're always striving to get into either a feeling of safety and security, or we're striving to get into a state of feeling that we have control, or we're striving to get into a state where we feel we're appreciated. So all of those states are something that we can manage by managing our own internal processing, our own internal way of thinking. Those feelings, although we search for them outside of ourselves always, they can come and go. They're not reliable. We can't just look for approval and acceptance always outside of ourselves, because then we're always a victim to that approval being taken away. We cannot always look for safety outside of ourselves, because again, at any time that can be taken away. And that sense of safety needs to reside deep within ourselves, that we are truly okay and we'll be fine. And the same with control. So the question is not whether or not you're going to hear your lesson, because your lesson will always show up. It's whether or not you want to hear it now. And I did share a little bit about, very lightly, my backstory is that, my lesson repeatedly showed up for me in various stages of my life. And it showed up in, career issues. The same lesson showed up in financial issues. The same lesson showed up in relationship issues. And so it was only about, the question is, when is it going to be loud enough for you to actually pay attention? And sometimes we need to go through many lessons, many different experiences, many different ways for that lesson to just keep showing back up before we start to pay attention. And I think this is a fantastic time with the world just becoming very quiet and very serene right now, and everybody just slowing down, is just an excellent time for us to notice, what is it that is starting to show up for me in this unease of this normal situation? What is it that's starting to come up and start to present itself? Is it an issue around safety and security? Is it an issue around approval or acceptance? Is it an issue around control? And then under each of those states, is it what particular emotions are showing up for me around that? So again, it's just a matter of, is this the time for you to sit down and do some of the deeper work. And like I say, what's guaranteed in life is, they say death and taxes are guaranteed. And I always like to add a third onto that, is that our lessons are guaranteed, because they will continue to come up in various ways until we are ready to do some work and do some deep work. And then what happens is that the life that we've been striving for so hard by looking outside of ourselves and trying to really control and look for what we need all outside of ourselves, once we realize that the work is inside and we can do the processing inside, that it all starts to show up for us. So what I would like to talk to you today is about improv. And I just feel that this whole time with COVID is really just become a huge improv lesson. So as we all know what improv comedy is comedy that is not written out, it is not pre-written, it's not memorized. Improv comedy usually involves, definitely involves more than one person. And it involves a very easy relationship between the multiple people, and they just feed off each other, and they allow the comedy just to show up as you respond to the other person's feedback, the other person's response back to you. It's a very much a kind of a flow between one and the other person. So back when I was in the corporate world, there was an opportunity to take an improv class for a bunch of us leaders. The idea being that they wanted us to obviously take the lessons of improv into the work environment, and to work on our ability to be responsive, to be a little bit less staunch in our approach, to realize that if we work together, the result can be much better than if we work just individually. So I went into this improv class at Second City here in Toronto. And what I found was that I found it to be quite difficult, actually. And when I look back now and I see how the lesson went and what my experience was, there is some great reflections upon that versus what's going on today with our current environment. So the lesson that they had us do, or the exercise they had us do, was, I think there was about 6 of us in the class, and they would start and give the first person a setup, a scene, and then that person would have to add to that scene with their own, whatever they wanted to. They could add anything they want, no restrictions, and then pass that developed scene to the next person, and they would change it up, and they would add whatever they wanted to add. So I think, for example, they may start out with the first person and say, you're sitting in a cafe and the cook comes out from behind the doors, and the cook is an alien. So it's obviously very unexpected, and then you take that from there. And then if you're the first responder, you go, the alien sits down and decides to have a cup of coffee with me, and and in walks Johnny Depp or something like that, and then it passes to the next person, and they keep going with it. And you can see how this could go in a multitude of directions, all depending on how everybody wants to play with it. So what I'm getting at is that when I got into my head and I really started to anticipate what the people in front of me are going to say, and how am I going to respond? Or I think they're going to say this, or what if they say that? And I get really obsessed outside of myself. And I really got worried about what they're going to say and trying to pre-think how I'm going to respond to that. My experience was not pleasant. It was not easy. It was rather painful. And my response obviously was probably not anything near brilliant. When I was able to, after doing this a couple of times, because I think everybody had that initial way of being, when we were able to kind of loosen up and just have fun with it and not worry about what everybody else was going to say next, and just trust that when the ball comes to me, or when it's my turn, that I'll think of something brilliant to say, and something fun and whimsical, and it will add value and I will enjoy it. When that became the state upon which all of us got into, the results were so much more brilliant and so much more funny and more enjoyable. So it's about being It's about being an improv person. Life is about being improvisational, about being flexible and not being rigid. Because when we're rigid, like I was at the beginning of those exercises, it was not enjoyable. It was not brilliant. It did not result in the best result possible. So what we have to learn is that the drive to be rigid and the drive to be think it all through, and I have to have the right answer, and I need to stay very much in my head, is a very ego driven response. It comes from a lot of fear, and it comes from a lot of being afraid of being wrong, and afraid of being embarrassed, maybe afraid of being less than. And so just to realize that that is where that kind of tendency to behave comes from, is from that state. And if we want to flourish, if we truly want to flourish, then we need to get out of that state, and we need to loosen up, and we need to just trust that we don't need to have it all figured out, because we don't know which way it's going to go anyway. Just like I could not, in my wildest dreams, think about what the 5 people in front of me were going to say as they were past the new script and how they were going to add to it. There was no way I could ever figure that out. We had so many combinations. If I spend my energy and my time trying to worry about that and trying to figure it out, then I miss the opportunity to be not only in the present moment, but I miss the opportunity to show up as my best self when it was my turn. So, I often ask people, when you think about someone who's been, wildly successful, let's say, doesn't have to be monetarily, just successful in life generally with joy and happiness. If you think of somebody that you truly admire, if you think of someone that you'd like your life to go like, if you think of someone who's living their wildest dreams, those kinds of people, and I'm sure we can all think of a couple of people that come to mind. And, let's just use Oprah Winfrey, because she's a well-known person. Everybody knows who she is. Everyone kind of knows her backstory. So this is a good example. I dare you to find anyone who has had that kind of life or is experiencing that kind of life that would say to you, or anyone, I knew exactly how it would all go. I had it all mapped out. I was in control every step of the way. Everybody that is living that pinnacle life experience is saying things like, I could not have imagined this. Not in my wildest dreams. This is beyond what I could ever imagine or ever thought could happen in my life. And the reason that they're experiencing this greatness is because they were flexible enough. They had the improv skills to just go with it, to just not worry about trying to create the future, but to put out there exactly the energy that they want to feel in the future. They want to be joyful and engaged and creative and productive and successful, but not to worry so much about how that was going to happen. And so that is something we need to reflect upon, is that the people that we maybe want to emulate a little bit in our lives, that they had flexibility and they had improv skills, and they were able to take whatever came to them, whatever scene was produced in front of them, and they were able to just respond to it in the best way possible for them. And it resulted in what they're living today. So even if we have predictions, even though we feel that we can predict some part of this world and what's going to happen, and we can read the paper and we can have some sense of where things are going to go, there is no doubt and there's no denying that even with predictions and some sense of data analysis and some sense of predictability, that we are living in a world of really heightened uncertainty. And like nobody saw 2020 coming. You look back to Christmas or New Year's or even January, And I think about back to what I was doing in January and February. And there's no way that even, that's not that long ago, that I could have predicted how the following months were going to go. And nobody could have really predicted what we would have been facing. And so we are living in a time of massive uncertainty. And that doesn't, what I'm offering here is that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Uncertainty is where growth exists. Uncomfortableness equals growth. There is no growth that one gets being totally comfortable. If you want to grow at any kind of skill, if you want to learn anything new, if you want to achieve any kind of physical development, if you're trying to develop your body, if you're trying to exercise, any kind of growth or development will require a sense of uncertainty. I really don't know how to do this. I don't know how this is all going to go. There's always that beginning part of uncertainty and feeling nervous. And there's always a sense of being uncomfortable because we're outside of our normal neurology. We're outside of our normal way of being. But growth and comfort do not hang out together. They are not best buddies. So I think we all can probably agree that we all want to be evolving and to be growing and to be learning and to be developing and to becoming the best versions of ourselves every day, little by little. So we have to start to welcome the sense of uncertainty and uncomfortableness into our normal sense of being. We have to start to look for that and to welcome it and to say, I welcome this. I welcome this sense of uncertainty and uncomfortableness because I know that it means that I am being challenged. And because I'm being challenged, I am growing. And challenge means that there's always new ways of being. And if I focus more about myself and how I'm responding and what's going on for me, and I constantly do my inner work, then I know that my response will be the best for me and the best response that I can put forward, and it will result in the best outcome. So the question kind of comes is, how do we then become comfortable with being these improv artists? Because we're always in these uncomfortable situations. I think back to that improv class, and that was a very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable experience for me. It probably took, it was a whole day exercise, and it probably took me to mid-afternoon before I started to loosen up and started to become somewhat comfortable with the whole exercise. So the question is, how do we then face the fact that we are living a time and we're moving into times of great uncertainty? We are in them. We're going to be uncomfortable probably most of the time, at least in the short term here. So how do we then allow that uncomfortableness and that uncertainty to flourish? And how do we become these masterful improv artists so that we respond in the best way and we take this to the best level possible? So there's a couple of ways that I have relied on in my past, in my life, for staying very responsive, staying very flexible, staying very able to kind of see the good in the uncertainty. So one of the first steps is I recognize when I'm becoming attached to a particular outcome, and I let go of that attachment whenever I can. So what I'm referring to here is that when I find that I am becoming, I like the word obsessed a lot, obviously I use it. When I become obsessed with something turning out a specific way, then I recognize that in myself, that I'm becoming obsessed with that happening a specific way, and I release that obsession, I release that attachment to that outcome, and I just come back and I remind myself that I don't know how this is all going to go. And just like I didn't know how it was all going to go in that improv class, I don't know how this is all going to go, but I'm going to trust that it's going to go the best way possible, and I can let go of my obsession with how I think it should be. There's a saying, and I know Marianne Williamson says this a lot. She says, if there's intelligence in the world that can turn an embryo into a baby, if the intelligence exists to turn an acorn into an oak tree, then we can pretty much assume with great certainty that the intelligence then that will manifest our life to its greatest level, to this most magnificent experience, to where it should go, exists, and that does not reside in our little thinking. That we need to let go of the steering wheel for a while and let that intelligence start to show up. Now, that does not mean that we disinvest from our dreams. It does not mean that we become just people that just exist and have no thoughts or no feelings or no desires. We can get into those imaginations, those desires. We can dream about how, what we want to feel like in the future, how we generally want our life to go. I'm talking about the obsession about how it's all going to happen. I talk a lot about, with my friends about, my ultimate dream is to be able to live a good chunk of my life in Australia where my daughter lives. And I can go there very quickly in my imagination of how that will feel, what that will be like, to be there, to enjoy that beautiful weather, to be close to my daughter and her family and my grandchildren. And I can get into the emotions of all that. How it's going to happen, how I am going to be able to move my business and my practice and my family from here to there is, I don't know. And I'm not going to obsess about how it's going to happen. I'm just going to stay very attuned to the fact that that is what I want, those end result, those end feelings. So back to the first step of letting go of to allowing ourselves to be great improv people, very responsive, very flexible, is to let go of any attachment to how we think it should go. Any attachment, let go of that. And then secondly is to bring our attention back to the here and now. When we recognize that it's out, our attention is outside of ourselves, it's out on other, what's everybody else doing, what's going on outside of me. If it's either fixated on my past and something that happened in my past, which is done and gone and over, or if I'm obsessing about anything outside of me in the future, then I realize that I need to bring my attention right back to the here and now. So again, back to the improv class, when I obsessed about what was going on 3 steps ahead of me and how that person was going to react and what they were going to say, and I just didn't stay centered with myself and how I'm feeling and enjoying the moment and getting into the right feelings of enjoyment, then it wasn't the best experience. So we want to bring our attention right back to the here and now. And then thirdly, we allow ourselves to get excited about our future. We get into the emotions of our future. That is all that we need to really do, is to get into exactly how we want to feel about our life, how generally what states we want to be in, and allow the details of our life to start to just show up the way they're naturally meant to show up. So I'll say it's kind of like a Christmas present. Nobody wants to get a Christmas present under the tree, that they know exactly what's in that box. The joy of Christmas and receiving a present is that you have no idea what's in the box. You have no idea what that person has thought you would like to have. And that's what makes Christmas enjoyable, is the anticipation and the excitement of what's in that present. So if you could think about your life like a Christmas present, and that you want to have the surprise and the delight of how this is all going to work out, and not obsess about what's inside that box for you, and just allow that experience of having the surprise and delight as your life unfolds. It will be much easier, and it just requires us to be much better improv people. So what I invite you to do this week is to practice those 3 steps. Sometimes I advise people to set a timer on their phone, because life can get busy and then we forget. So if you want, put a timer on your watch, on your phone, whatever you use, for, let's say, once an hour, that it goes off, and then you check with yourself. Am I in the here and now, or is my mind wandered off into the past or into the future? And if it is, that's okay. Just bring it back to the here and now. Am I getting worried about the details of how this is all going to go? Worried about what the person in front of me is going to do? If you were in the improv class, are you doing that kind of thing? And if so, let go and just say, I don't need to figure it out. Just like I didn't need to figure out what everybody was going to say, we don't need to figure it all out either. I don't need to figure it out. I can just come back and make sure I'm good and I'm okay. And then thirdly, just allow yourself then to imagine any kind of future or life or state, even of today, of being in great emotional state. And just say, I'm just going to trust that when I'm associated with the emotions that I really want to live this life with, that how those emotions show up will start to come into my awareness. So I hope you enjoyed today's webinar on becoming improv artists with your life. And you can see areas and ways that you need and you can loosen up and enjoy. This isn't, I think we make life tougher than it is. So just like I made that improv class tougher than it was. See where you can just let go and let loose and see what comes up for you this week. I hope you all enjoyed that, and I look forward to talking to you on Monday and giving some more insights for you to work on. Take care, stay home, and stay safe. Bye-bye.